So let's move on now to the lower and get this done really quickly if I can. All right, that being said, so this one is interesting. Let's look at it real quick before we take it apart. You'll notice the one departure here is that it has one pin versus two above the trigger. There's another pin back here, it's the trigger housing pin. This is a trigger pin. What it's lacking is a locking block pin, okay? Keeping that in mind, just as some nomenclature, slide stop lever or slide release, slide lock lever or takedown lever, magazine catch or magazine button, magazine release button, trigger of course. This steel rod is the ejector. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's not the extractor, it's the ejector. It's what ejects the rounds out of the chamber. And then of course there's a trigger bar, and inside here is a connector and the trigger housing and a trigger housing spring. A little different here, and certainly different up front than we're used to seeing. So first things first, what I like to do with this particular gun is I'm going to go ahead and take out the slide lock lever, okay? Now this is a little different animal too. In the older, or the original Glocks, it had a leaf spring. This does not have a leaf spring. It has a coil spring that sits underneath that. So it's a little troublesome to take apart when you kind of just look at it and say, well, how am I going to do that? The technique here is to kind of tilt this guy down. Okay, we're going to press that spring down and then tilt it and walk it out. It's not easy, it's not hard, but it's something that you can kind of do with a little bit of practice. So I'm tilting it down and out, and it will jump back into space there for you if you don't do it all the time. Tilt it down, and let's get this guy to move over there if I can. So here we go, keeping it down. I'm gonna take my punch and push it out if I can. So I'm pushing it out. Okay, so now here it comes. Now the key factor is, as I pull it out, I want to make sure that I capture that spring with my finger so it doesn't go flying around. Okay, there's your slide lock. Okay, always keep in mind that the slot goes to the rear. Okay. Okay, now looking inside here, you'll see the spring, and I hope we can get some light in here. There it is. Let's get my glasses so I can see it too. And so it's right here. Right there's that little spring. I'm going to pull it out. You'll capture it here. And out it drops. So there's the slide lock spring and the slide lock itself. Okay. Now I took that out because sometimes there's a little interference between the slide lock and this trigger pin. Now this trigger pin, I want to be honest with you, is a real pain, okay? It's harder to take out than any other Glock, and there's a reason, because of the way it's shaped and formed. You'll see it has the same natural shape, but this slide stop lever is a different style, and it captures itself on the trigger pin very tightly, and it locks itself into one of the notches. So there is a trick though. And the trick is to reach in here and actually depress the unit, that being the slide stop lever. You actually want to get in here with your finger up here towards the pin and push it down. You'll notice that it's spring loaded. Okay, so what's happening, if you don't press that down, that spring pressure is locking that hole into the notch of the trigger pin. So you have to come up here and press that down. Unfortunately, it's a three-hand operation, all right? Because it's kind of hard to do that and then get a punch and actually do that as well. So you could try to do it with one hand and do this by hand, which is not necessarily impossible. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my cameraman lock his camera down, come in, and we're actually going to have him push down on this thing, and then I'm going to use my punch. Now this is why you get married, because basically you say, honey, get in here and push this thing down, hold this. My wife would kill me if she heard me say that. But she would do it for me, trust me, even with her nails. So come in here, give me a finger. And I need you to push in here, right there, down. You'll feel the pressure. You feel it? Okay. So now he's got it down, and I'm going to go ahead and take my punch and give it a good whack and see if we can get this thing out of here relatively quickly. So this is my punch set. and out it comes just like that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, see? That was easy, right? Again, it's really easy when you have someone pushing that down. I still have not come up with a way to push that down and get that out of there. You probably could force it out on top here like so. All right, so, but you have to reduce that pressure, and I'll show you why right now, because let me show you this pin. So if you get a close-up in here, you're going to see this little notch is intersecting. Let's see if I can get some light on this thing here, back behind here maybe. Okay. So this little notch right here is intersecting with the slide stop lever, or the slide release. And it's not, it has spring pressure up on it, so if you don't push that thing down, it's not coming out. I mean, you can beat on it, you know, for a while, and we have. My guys got really frustrated until we figured it out. Okay, so that being said, now the next thing I can do is remove the trigger, the locking block itself. And it's just going to lift out like so. Here comes the locking block, and you'll see that there's a hole there where that pin goes through. But that's not the culprit. The culprit is this guy right here, the slide stop lever. And you'll see it is a unique shape. It's different than the standard factory guns that we've been working with for 20 years. They redesigned this thing, and it's got a weird little spring. See that spring system there? And you know, what's happening is somehow this thing is pushing up on that notch and capturing it. So if you don't get this pushed down, it's going to lock itself into that notch and just not be moved right there. That's what it's doing. So hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and put that off the side. That's your slide stop or slide release. And now we've got basically the front half taken out. We can just take our trigger assembly and lift it all out together as one unit. But I first have to take out the trigger housing pin, which I will use my very fine little punch. And this is just a plastic pin that comes out very easily. And I'll drop it into the hole there. And now I can drag everything out at one time. And this is the trigger bar and trigger housing assembly. Now this is also different than your standard Glock. Everything else really looks the same up here, but the way that this intersects back here is completely different. All right, so it's real important we look at that real quick. So first and foremost, you're going to notice that there is a different trigger spring mechanism, and it is not attached to the bar itself. So if you're playing with this thing and all of a sudden the bar becomes dislodged, you may be concerned, oh, what happened? Because the standard Glocks, the original Glocks, have a little hook here that captures that spring, and you put the spring, the trigger spring, into the housing, and it's all one unit in a sense. But this spring is really, really different. So let me get my glasses on again. I can try to describe for you what's going on here. What Glock has done is they put the spring internally, and it locks itself into this trigger housing back down here. So hopefully you can get a little closer than that, and you can see that little guy there. That's the one side. It's got a little, I call it a guide rod for the spring. The spring goes over top of that. And let me get the connector out of here real quick. So you'll see the spring sits right here, and there's a little metal piece that has a hook on it right there. And that motion, let me pull it around here so you can see the hook. That motion is the trigger return. And that's what the trigger spring does. It returns the trigger after you pull the trigger. After you go bang, it returns it back. So it's a little goofy to look at that, because what you have to do is you've got to get this front leg of the cruciform of the trigger bar, this front piece, has to slide underneath that little notch there in that metal piece that's attached to the spring, because that's the motion we're looking for, is this back and forth. So when you put it back in, and to get it out, you push forward and twist it just like you do. When you put this trigger bar back into this trigger housing, it has to face forward and have to get it there. Now, I've taken the connector out to make it easy so you can see these parts. So there's the spring, There's a little leg leaf of steel that captures the trigger bar, and there's a guide rod that goes down in here all the way back to here. So that's a little plastic guide rod that goes back and forth there. So that's what's going on with this piece. Everything else is pretty straightforward. You know, it looks just like a normal connector. We do have a 3.5-pound connector available for this, and it does significantly reduce the trigger pull. Glock says this is a 5-pound trigger pull. I say, you know, the ones we see coming out of the factory, they're 7 or 8. So maybe they will loosen up over time. The 3.5-pound connector does operate the same way as our other double diamond 3.5-pound connector. It gives you a better angle on this trigger release ledge right here that allows the trigger to fall off quicker and allows it to be a little lighter in pull, so it will increase your accuracy and your speeds and not affect any of the safety whatsoever. So that's our 3.5-pound connector. I've already installed it in this gun because I couldn't stand the other one, and it really makes a big difference. Now let's go ahead and put this trigger bar back into place, and we'll put this thing back together. So again, remember, once the connector's in, it's a little bit harder to get this, this piece in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to angle the bar, okay, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to capture that lip first. Then I'm going to pull it forward, and I missed it there, but here I got to pull it forward and then put it underneath the slot there in the trigger. So there it is underneath, and there's where on the trigger housing, so I have to put it there. So you'll know you have it when you can lift it up and you can see that that piece is over top of the trigger bar itself. See that little ledge? Okay. All right. So now that's basically your complete trigger housing assembly as well as your trigger bar. So this will drop right back into the Glock, and I can just put that back in right now. And it's fairly easy because this goes in only one way. And you'll hear it, maybe a little snap. No, you didn't. So there it is. Now the other thing to observe is that, wow, gee, the trigger hole lines up. Okay, that's a good sign. So now you know it's kind of in the right spot. But you will see that you could move that a little bit and move it around just out of spec, so you have to make sure it's lined up before you put any of your other parts in or try to put that pin back in. That being done, let's go ahead and put back our locking block, and then we'll put our pins in. Let me get this guy back in first. This is going to be our slide stop lever. So you'll notice again that that hole is going to line up with this hole. It's going to sit here about so. So I'm going to drop this guy right in here into the slot. Very difficult to show you, but let me see if we can get your camera in there. It really just goes as close as it can be because it has to rest out here, the actual finger. So you just kind of guide this guy into that center spot and then find this home here. It'll see itself. And then you can look in the hole there and you can see as you slide this thing back and forth a little bit where it fits. And so you can get that hole. And you can also just push down on that and notice how it operates, and it wants to sit a little high. So when you push it down, the hole lines up better. Okay, so that's the trick of taking that thing apart. It's also maybe a trick to put it back together. Here's our locking block. It also has a trigger hole, a trigger pin hole. And so we're going to put it right on top and push it down. And now I can look in there and I can see, well, they're not quite lined up perfectly. So one of the things you can do is take a punch and get in there and kind of pull everything down and make sure it gets, seated right before I try to put that pin back in. And the pin is basically doesn't matter which side. There's really no one side to it. It's both sides work. We always typically take the pins out from the left side to the right, and we put them back in from the right side to the left. Now, if everything is all lined up perfectly, I should be able to just thumb this thing in, but I did turn the gun upside down and I did see it move a little bit. So now let me go back in here and look at these guys. And I think the trick again is I'm going to come in here and push this trigger slide stop lever down a little bit with my finger as I put the pin back in. Now I can just go in with my hand. And interestingly enough, I felt it click into place. So keep that in mind. It clicked into that notch. So that slide stop lever wants to sit up into that notch. And the only way to really get it out is to push it back down. So that's the one good trick that you're really going to learn. You have to learn because otherwise it's going to be impossible to take apart. Now, Here's putting this spring back into this frame for the slide lock lever. Why don't I go ahead and put my other pin in real quick, which is my trigger housing pin. And this is what I like about this this mallet set we have, pin set we have. It has a nylon mallet. You just tap that in there and you can tap on it all day long and it's not going to hurt the frame. You can true that guy up with the little edge there. So that's nice. Okay, so now let's get back to this slide lock spring. There's a little round channel down there and it actually just wants to sit there, so I'm going to just drop it in there. Maybe you can see that if I get a little light on there. Right, I'll get my punch in there. Right in here. Let's see, you can see that round notch right there? Sure you can, right there. That's where that spring goes straight down. So it's going to be impossible to show it to you in real time, so just drop it in there, and now I'll let you see it again. See how that spring sits there? Now the spring goes up and down. So how do you get this back in? Well, first of all, I'm going to take out the factory slide lock lever, and I'm going to put in what we call our precision slide lock lever. And this guy is a little thicker than the factory, so it's going to give me a little better lockup and a little bit longer as well. It's extended, so that it makes it a little easier to take apart. I mean, just a little bit longer and a little bit thicker, really small, but those little differences help lock it up a little bit. And you'll notice, you know, that ours is a little bit truer, I'd say, because it's machined and not stamped. So if you notice when I put my finger on the side, how it wants to jump up, because it's not quite flat. And I put the finger on my side of the one we manufacture, and it doesn't jump up. See that? And I can try that with this one, it doesn't do it. That flatness helps the gun lock up more consistently and tighter than the factory. And that's what we've seen. We see better groups, we see better accuracy, and it's a lot easier to take the gun apart. So now, what we got to do is get in here, and to put this in, I kind of want to angle it up and get it over that spring and then push the spring down with the one leg. So if I get it started, and then I come in here with my punch, and I push this guy down, push the spring down just a little bit just to get this started. So I've had pretty good luck with a flathead screwdriver, and I think I'm going to go ahead and transition to that and pick this guy up. And now you'll notice here, I'm just going to take this flathead screwdriver, and it allows me to push that spring down and then get this guy, this slide lock lever started. There we go. There we go. And so now you'll see, got the motion we're looking for. So the spring is working. Look inside, I see the spring working. It gives a little bit bigger sides to grab hold of, and it still does what I want, but it's going to give me better accuracy and more consistency. Okay, so there now is our lower. And so now we can marry these two together. Yep, feels good, looks good. And I would say that, you know, fairly easy disassembly, reassembly procedure. Does take some time, but if you got the right tools and a couple techniques, it's really gonna help you get over the frustration level. I'm Lenny Magill, thanks for watching. Now, we've got another video coming up on the extensions for your Glock 43, so find that one on YouTube and we'll see you next time.